Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'm chatting with Gabriel René from VERSES. The talk of the stock market in 2023 has been artificial intelligence. Ever since ChatGPT hit the scene, followed by NVIDIA putting out massive guidance for Q2, all the financial media wants to talk about basically is artificial intelligence. And the reality is that there is a small number of companies that are actually doing real things in the space. And I think that it's worth doing our homework and starting to learn about these names. And I love when I get a chance to chat with Gabriel because he's done tech in the Valley for years. And he's one of the few people I can go to ask questions about the space who actually knows what's going on. Not only that, when you hear what's going on at VERSES, it's a big idea, and Gabriel throws out some pretty big numbers, so you're going to want to watch this one till the end. All right, everybody, enjoy the interview. Gabriel, thanks so much for joining us today.
Great to be back here, Steve.
So AI has been pretty much all over CNBC every day. The name everybody's talking about is NVIDIA, which is sort of seemingly leading the AI charge. And it certainly seems like they're looking for names to talk about that are related to AI. Let me start by asking you, where are we in the AI cycle? Would you say that it's in the first inning?
I would say it's more like the first minute. Typically, these cycles from a technology perspective are about 15 years. You could imagine just going back 15 years almost exactly. The iPhone just kicked off the Web 2.0, the smartphone age, the age of social media, the age of mobile access to content and geolocation services and all the rest. That was just, I think, a week or two ago that hit that 15-year anniversary. If you go back 15 years before that, 1992, that was when the World Wide Web 1.0 wave began. And if you go 15 years before that, you go back to 1977 when the PC started. So we tend to believe that these things go about 15 years. In fact, even the fact that Apple just announced their new Vision Pro headset sort of indicates that they also see this as a 15-year cycle.
I got to stop you there because we actually had a question for you on that, and I took it out because I was like, I don't know if you're going to want to talk about this, but I have to ask you. You brought it up. What do you think is happening with that? Do you think Apple was just desperate for news, or do you think that this whole VR headset thing is going to be a thing? Because I mean, Meta's taken a lot of criticism over their handling of the metaverse.
Well, interestingly enough, Apple's current product vision, which I need to point out, was announced at their developer conference and not at their consumer products event, is a way to kick off really a new computing era where that is the main interface, where the interface is based on voice or based on gesture, based on eye tracking. And because those are more intuitive ways of interacting, that is driving us towards a more efficient, more productive, easier way of computing. So, Apple is not, they don't move fast. They tend to not be the first mover in a category. They tend to be the one that actually gets traction. If you look back at the last decade, you're going to see many, many acquisitions guided towards this moment. Optics companies, rendering companies. You're going to see their design of their operating system to incorporate three-dimensional data from everything from the moment your smartphone started mapping your face in order to unlock it. That was part of this vision. You're going to see even the fact that they've gone more vertically integrated, building their own chips and building their own optics and building their own hardware has all led to this moment. In fact, this has probably been Tim's dream for almost a decade, at least about 7 or 8 years. And so that's, I don't think this is just something that can be sort of waved off like Google Glass. I do believe that this is the beginning of a shift towards some sort of wearable computer.
Again, looking at this space, and it seems like CNBC right now, they want to talk about the space. They want to talk about names. And right now there's not that many companies out there for them to talk about. What do you think that the future of AI as just like a general investment theme is going to look like? Do you think that it's going to be very concentrated where there's only a few handful of real companies that are actually doing real things in the space? Or do you think that there's just going to be so many ancillary opportunities that there's going to be tons of ways for investors to play the theme?
Both, actually, because I think that to invest in AI is one. There's one level of benefit there where you're trying to find, like, say, pure play AI companies, of which there are only a handful. I would argue none of the big tech companies qualify. Google's not an AI company. Microsoft's not an AI company. NVIDIA's not an AI company, right? So on and so forth. You have vertical players like C3.ai and Palantir and a few others, and just a few others. And then you have a lot of folks that really have been AI, but it's the classical AI approach, which is a little more where C3 has been for the last few years. That's trying to shift into this generative AI approach, which is what really just launched in December, January here. So yeah, there's only a handful of pure play players. You can invest in big tech that are now, the tail is wagging the dog, and AI is driving a lot of their decision making around product development, and their go-to-market strategies are now all driven by AI. However, there's a secondary opportunity here, which is companies that begin to use AI to accelerate everything across every spectrum, across every industry. So you will see AI as an accelerator, much like we saw machines as an accelerator in the industrial age, right? These are ways of enhancing or even offloading, cognitive labor or mental labor. And so that is the whole point, is that the decision making moves from the sort of analog human mind to algorithms that are able to do it, constantly in real time and at a much greater scale than we can.
Let's say you're a young person at home watching this interview, and you're trying to figure out, how do I get involved in the AI space? What type of areas do you think are going to suddenly appear for young people that maybe aren't programmers, or maybe they've got to learn to become them? Like we've seen the CEO of NVIDIA talk about how anybody can be a programmer now. What advice would you have for young people that want to get into the AI space?
Well, the first thing to maybe point out is that the young people are already in the AI space.
Okay.
That's what's happening, is that they're just naturally gravitating towards sites like Midjourney, and they're creating, millions of pieces of artwork a month, or they're interacting with Chat GPT. And the college students are great examples who have realized that maybe this essay could be co-drafted by Chat GPT instead of me. And so it's a little bit like asking, how do you get kids into texting in the Web 2.0? They are doing the texting, and so they're actually leading the charge here. So my advice would be to anyone who isn't, is to start playing with all of the various tools out there. They're at a very early stage. This whole market is 6 months old, and there's a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of demand, and there's a lot of disruption, and it's just good to get in and play in the sandbox. It's not about having clarity about where this ends up at that stage. It's about getting involved and playing through the process. Even just in the age of apps, which I think we're actually moving out of the age of apps. No one could predict from one year to the next what the hot new app will be next year. Like, no one saw Uber coming. No one saw Postmates coming. No one saw Airbnb coming. The industries that had been there for the taxi industry or the hotel industry or delivery services had been very stable for decades, and then boom, right? So it's hard to predict when these new capabilities come in, where the disruptions are going to happen, but it's easy to look back and see that those disruptions tend to happen almost everywhere.
It's interesting. It just hearing you talk about for young people to kind of want to get involved in the space. It's almost like I'm having flashbacks to sort of the late 90s or maybe mid 90s, when just knowing how to use Microsoft Office was was such an asset for an individual to go into a job interview, right? Like, hey, I know how to use PowerPoint, Excel. And now we've got these sort of, I've tried to play on Midjourney a little bit. I found it very daunting because it's sort of, you got to operate it in a Discord server. I tried to make a photo of myself surrounded by a bunch of attractive females in a Dan Bilzerian photo, and it just ended up being a total disaster. I'll see if I can find it for when we edit this. But the Chat GPT thing I just find wildly fascinating, and for my takeaway from it is it's really just honestly a tool, and the better you get at learning how to use that tool, the more productive you can be at whatever the function is that you're trying to accomplish.
I like that analogy. I see it similarly. I think one way to think of it is the difference between hand tools and power tools. And so computing today is a hand tool. We're doing all this typing and searching and swiping and, and what AI does is becomes a power tool for computing for anything.
We hear a lot in the media about this sort of Terminator situation that AI is going to take us to, and I'm sure you get asked this all the time. How concerned should people be about where AI could take us in the sense that it could take us to sort of a dark place?
Concerned. I think that what we're talking about is sort of its power, right? And it's a powerful thing that has the power to spread. In every sci-fi story, it's not, the problem isn't that someone builds some single AI that makes itself into a giant Godzilla-like robot and runs around smashing everything. It's always that it gets into the network. And in every version of that, it's like, uh-oh. Now, like the moment that happens, we all know where the story goes. Now I can build stuff and connect things into there. So even in the case of Terminator, it's not that one robot was terrifying to humanity. It was terrifying to a couple of people. It was that Skynet happened, right? And then in the future, there was this sort of all-out war. Similar thing with the Matrix, similar thing with Ultron in Marvel series, right? So it gets into, and there are 100 other sort of B-class sci-fi stories. There is a range of concerns, from immediate concerns that are near term, just with things like ChatGPT, around its ability to, be a power tool for disinformation or for fraud. There's deep fakes, like it's another form of fraud where, you can be impersonated and now your voice and now you're right. And so these are, bias, misinformation, fraud. These are the things that are currently happening, right? Where people are, we should be concerned about how the police forces are using these to be able to identify who isn't the criminal if it's filled with a bunch of, bias in the system. We should be concerned about, how credit card companies start to use this or approve people for loans for homes or determine good candidates for jobs. So these are near-term concerns. And real world harms that are already occurring at various scales. You could argue that, as Tristan Harris, who runs the Center for Humane Technology, has articulated recently, that this is our second sort of encounter with AI. That Web 2.0 and social media algorithms were kind of the first, and we saw the effect that information and disinformation, produced at scale. Where it was monetizing our attention, and so driving us towards more hyper-polarized views, because it created more economic engagement within these applications, has caused societal rifts, political, social, cultural, however you want to look at it. So this next wave, even before we get to Skynet, has some near-term concerns that we need to address immediately. Secondarily, as these things become increasingly autonomous, not just in so-called intelligent, and are operating in the networks, then yes, you can approach scenarios where either human actors are using these algorithms to drive, let's say harms at scale, or that there's sort of the accidental version of Skynet, which is often talked about in the AI ethics space, where it gets fixated on the wrong sort of outcome, like to make everyone happy. It'll make everyone happy. So happy beans correlates to smiling. So we'll just get a bunch of drones and go inject Smilex into everyone's face, so they just look like they're smiling all the time. Job is well done. And it's sort of this misunderstanding of the coherence of human values and goals, where we're optimizing for the wrong thing that could run out of control. And that being said, I don't think that there's like a near-term scenario that looks anything like Terminator.
There's a lot of talk about general AI versus narrow AI. Can you explain the difference to our audience, and how close are we to general AI being a regular thing in our daily lives?
So, back in 1951 or so, a man named Alan Turing invented the modern day computer. This was essentially a project to try to crack Nazi codes during World War II in Britain. And Turing really is the father of modern day computing era. He also asked the question, can machines think? And so when we talk about artificial narrow intelligence versus artificial general intelligence, and then there's even artificial super intelligence, those are like three major categories of the road that AI is sort of intended or projected to take over time. Narrow means that it's good at kind of one thing, right? So ChatGPT is really great with text. It's not that good with math. Midjourney is really great with imagery, but if you add it to add text like a billboard, it'll just completely jumble it up. It doesn't understand text; it just understands images. Some are good at sound. Some are good at computer vision, recognizing an object. Some are good at classifying that object. Some are good at recognizing the shape of the object, not just the attributes of the object. And so each of these are kind of single purpose tools like hammer, screwdriver, wrench, right? And so AGI, artificial general intelligence, is like something that could use all those tools and know which tool to use in any given situation, right? It's like, I'll show up at the toolbox and I'm a handyman and I can fix anything that you have. And so the concept of AGI is that it has a general intelligence, like humans are described as being generally intelligent. We can learn different things. We can adapt when new information comes in, and we're able to apply information we learn in one domain into another domain. Why? Because we learned the principles underneath what drives something, not just the correlation of data, which is what ChatGPT and these others are doing. So understanding the fundamental sort of causal effects and mechanisms, the underlying principles of things allow us to, like, you understand physics, whether you're picking up a coffee mug or whether you're playing, baseball with your kids, or right, or whether you're surfing or whether you're at the gym. That universal understanding of gravity and physics, allows you to transfer it to different domains. And these systems today, the state-of-the-art AIs, generative AI included, generative, not general, are only able to operate in narrow fields. General intelligence, artificial general intelligence, or AGI, is the holy grail of all of computing and of AI, because there's one last thing that it's assumed to be able to do, which is that it can self-improve. And so in a way, it's the last tool. It's the tool, it's the last invention. It's the invention that can begin to invent itself from there on after. And this is what's often called the singularity, or a turning point, because past that point, we don't really know what it might do. And this is why people get afraid of a Skynet scenario or others, because Skynet would be something that is generally intelligent and generally able to figure that out. However, Jarvis in the Marvel movies is also capable of this, and actually becomes the character that beats Ultron in the end in the form of Vision, right? And so there are, just like fire, we've been dealing with this since arguably our first couple of tools here. It has the ability to cook our food for us, but it's also capable of burning us. And so it's all about how well we wield these things.
The way you describe it, it's almost like general intelligence would be like the greatest or most significant technology ever invented, in the sense of like how much it could change and impact our lives.
Yes. That this is, no one knows what to invent after that.
So I guess it's safe to say that this is what all the big tech companies are playing for, the Googles, the Microsofts, the I don't know, Facebook to what extent, but Okay, so let's get into Versus. I know we've had you on here before, but there's going to be some people who are watching this for the first time. So, can you give us a quick little overview on what Versus does?
Well, we consider ourselves a cognitive computing company that is building artificial general intelligent capabilities into a software platform, which we call COSM, that will allow anyone to generate their own artificial intelligent applications, agents, and solutions that are generally intelligent and can learn on whatever data you supply them to essentially try to operate for any sort of optimization goal that you have, whether that's in software or that's in hardware. So, we're building COSM is a sort of operating system for AI agents to be able to operate on. And if you can think of an agent a little bit like an intelligent super application that can use other apps, can use data from websites, emails, whatever, and can summarize that information, can react and respond on your behalf, and can even be embedded into physical things like cars and drones and fly and navigate these because it understands the physics of the world. So the simpler way to say this is we believe that we're the only company in the world actually building AGI right now.
That's a pretty big statement. um, uh, so right now, this effectively an enterprise solution where you guys are sort of shopping this to big companies. That'd be sort of fair to say.
I would say that our early versions of our test technology are already monetized and being used by large industrial and enterprise companies.
Is there a plan to have the COSM platform sort of available on a direct to consumer basis, or it's more for a tool for enterprises to incorporate into their system and then offer to consumers?
Our plan is that this effectively replaces the iPhone as the main thing that you interact with, whether you're as an individual in your personal life or in your professional life, because it becomes the thing that interacts with all the rest of the digital systems in your life. So you don't order an Uber, you don't go to an app, you don't go to DoorDash to order a sandwich, you don't need to go to hotels.com, you don't need to search the web. You can just ask your agent. It's plugged into all these things and it does that for you, summarizes it. So, we're really making a shift from the personal computing era where you have to personally compute and you have to remember where everything is and you have to remember which app does what and which browser tab you're supposed to be on and which one you were on 5 minutes ago. You have to go search and find stuff, right? You have to collate and aggregate and summarize and make decisions. And instead, the big transition is that this is what AI agents are now going to do as we move into the next few years here. In fact, Bill Gates literally just said this almost 2 weeks ago, that the real winner, the real game here is whoever can develop the personal agent. And because he said, you'll never go to a search site again. You won't go use a productivity app. You won't go to Amazon for shopping. You'll just tell your agent like it was this a personal assistant that understands your preferences, your needs, your wants, your goals, and is sort of optimizing your life in a way that if you were very wealthy, maybe you had one or two personal assistants that were able to do that for you. Someone to train you, when you go to the gym, and someone to guide you on business decisions, and someone to help, manage all of the administrative aspects of your life. Well, that's what the big prize is. And Bill Gates also said there's a 50-50 chance that the winner of this next age is going to be a startup. And I guess we would agree.
Wow, that's sincerely very exciting if you can pull it off. So where does the platform sit today? You said it's getting used by a few companies, but the long-term goal is that this would be used by the consumer, like in presumably a smartphone or whatever technologies around them.
Yeah, we'd like you to be able to access your agent from your smartphone, from your laptop. It's a browser plugin. You can access it in your car. You can use it to interface with all the smart devices in your life, and it's sort of device agnostic, kind of a cloud agent, if you will, that can be anywhere that you need it to be. This is something we're planning on rolling out in a beta capacity this year. So we're watching the market. It's about, like I said, it's about 6 months old, and so trying to figure out the right set of features that are the most relevant to capturing early users is part of the decision-making process we're going through now. But we're on track to release the beta version of this year.
I've seen a couple companies that are sort of, junior tech type companies that have made similar announcements, but then like you read it's like powered by ChatGPT or something like that. This is your own proprietary solution is what I'm understanding.
Yes, but more than that, it doesn't use these sort of what are called large language models like ChatGPT or Bard, which is Google's new one, Llama, which is Facebook or Meta has one that they've open sourced. The challenge with these large language models is they've been built by crawling all the data on the web, all the text, if you will, in this case, and trying to recognize patterns within that text that would lead it to give you an answer that is correct for whatever you ask. And in that way, it's much better than a search engine, because search engines just sort of a referral business. Like you come to Google, you ask a question, it says, I don't have the answer, but maybe one of these 10 links has your answer. And we spend a lot of our time surfing the web, it's more like scuba diving the web, trying to find little bits of information and recollate them into something. However, these things lie. They just make stuff up. They give you the statistical answer, but it's incorrect. And so, there was a professor, I think MIT last month, who had his students, because this has become a problem where students are using ChatGPT to generate essays, and teachers are catching just like citations in the essay that to an author that exists, but to a paper that never existed, that was just sort of fabricated or confabulated by the AI. This is a real problem, because it means that your level of trustworthiness it cannot be very high. Like if in a system where you're generating some artwork and you want to have a picture of you and surrounded by a bunch of beautiful women in the style of a particular artist, aside from the copyright or IP infringement issues, which many of them are being sued for because of that very concern, you have this secondary issue, which is that the inherent bias that goes into that system, which was cultivated from crawling all that text, result in something that's not true. So if it's just art and it looks 92% accurate, or it's a poem, or it's that's fine. The minute you need something above 99% accuracy, driving a car, a drone, medical diagnostics, hiring someone for a job, these things become a real problem. And this is why we've seen the last 45 days or so major calls from every government in the world demanding explainability and trustworthiness from these systems, and large multi-million-dollar fines being proposed for the companies that deploy these. So in some cases, it might be that the big tech or big AI providers or the little ones that are building on top of them are building on quicksand, because at the moment it looks like they are both incapable of being explainable, just because of the sheer massive size of these AI models, and that the regulatory risk now has become something so significant that it may limit downstream trust. If you're Equifax, are you going to build a new AI-powered, credit analysis service on top of Google's Bard or on top of Microsoft, Azure, which is running on ChatGPT? If in fact the fine for anything that occurs that could bias somebody, or someone might claim that they've been harmed in the EU, in the entire EU, could result in 2% to 6% of your global revenues being taken as a fine, because someone said, well, I actually think I was a great candidate for that job. And then they come to you and say, oh, you're Equifax. I come to you and say, well, I've been denied for a job. I go to the regulator in Brussels, and I say, I don't know why I was turned down for this job. They go to you and they say, well, what was the reason this person was turned down for this job? And you go, I don't know, the AI said so. Well, which AI? Microsoft. Well, we're finding you, Equifax. Right? So the problem is that are the current approaches to AI that give you 92%, let's say, accuracy, is that good enough for when you need 99%, if now the regulatory climate is setting the bar at 99+%, and you technically can't jump it? Versus approach is completely different from this. We don't use big data. We don't need NVIDIA GPUs. We don't need 10,000 computers and the power of a small sun. We come from a background in essentially neuroscience. And so the types of artificial intelligence solutions that we're building can be run on small systems. They learn in real time, unlike the state of the art ones, which actually can't learn. They're able to learn from lots of types of data, both structured and unstructured. And we map it into a type of data model that's completely explainable. In fact, we just put a paper out yesterday describing our approach to explainable AI. So my argument, though, is twofold. Number one, our AIs can learn and adapt in real time. Theirs do not. And my argument is that doesn't even qualify as intelligent, because intelligence is not a state, it's a process. Number two, ours are inherently explainable because we've been developing them on an explicit modeling language and with a type of AI that is capable of growing and learning over time. So both the AGI claim, which I would argue we have a more valid approach to scientifically, and our engineering take, and the explainability requirement, which looks like really the hurdle that's going to be necessary for this ecosystem to grow. I would argue we're the only ones in position right now that can deliver on that.
So it's, if I'm understanding you correctly, it's effectively like, let's say your Equifax, it's the ability to explain what the model did to hire that person or not hire that person.
Literally, what were the decisions and what data were involved in those decisions. And so this is a problem for someone like Microsoft in two ways. Number one, technically that may not be possible. Now, Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, has suggested they may not even be able to operate in the EU because his words, we're not sure if we can technically comply. So one, it's not me saying it, it's them saying it. Number two, if they do understand exactly what went in, which would be a feat in and of itself, there may be proprietary, mechanisms in there that are part of their secret sauce. So they don't want to share that information. In both cases, you have a real problem. So I would say that's accurate.
So how does the Verses platform or the COSM platform get the data that it needs? Because like my understanding is, I've heard this from people, but also as you've described it, is that in some ways I've heard some people say that ChatGPT was really kind of more of a hardware achievement, that they were able to just connect so many servers to work so fast. Your technology, like theoretically, like let's just say I want to do an essay on Bernie Madoff. Is it going to sort of scan the internet? Where does it go to get the information that it needs if it doesn't have this huge sort of I don't know if database is the right term, but of a ton of data to go and get that data from?
Well, I guess one way to frame this would be, if you wanted to use a supercomputer in 1965, then you would need and have it provide you answers. You would need to put all of the information into that massive room scale computer, right? And so why didn't we just build bigger and bigger supercomputers, one large enough that just it sits on top of, it's the Arctic, and we all just like pipe into that thing? Because the approach that worked better was everyone got their own computer, then we connected those, and then we were able to share information. So the fact that the web exists suggests that networks with data being shared across a network is a superior method than one monolithic sort of data source that happens to be, in this case, only limited to data that ended at September 2021. It's like they're trying to be a massive encyclopedia, right? Here's Encyclopedia Britannica. Let's say, here's ChatGPT 2021, and they ship it to you, right? And that's cool. You can ask it any question of any data that's in there. So, whatever happened to Bernie Madoff, up until that date, anything that happened to Bernie Madoff yesterday, it doesn't know, right? It has no access to that. So which would you prefer, Wikipedia for that resource, or would you prefer that ChatGPT Encyclopedia Britannica, 2021, all 100 volumes? That's the problem here, is that trying to put all of the data in one place, that one AI somehow has all the data. In this case, it's only text data, not video data, not images, not physical information, not nothing that isn't like, it's only 5% of the data on the web, by the way, not 95%, which is behind a password, behind a login. So you ask, how does Verses get the data? I think it's not really the right question. We're not getting the data. We're giving you a tool to put your data into that, then lets you have an agent that operates on your data. So asking questions about Bernie Madoff, maybe ChatGPT is a better resource for that. Asking like what's the most important like emails from last week that you missed, that would be something that Gia, our agent, would be able to answer. What's a bookmark that I have? What are the most relevant bookmarks that I have in on my browser that are relevant to the thing that I'm working on right now that I've never had the time to go back in and look at? And by the way, I have no idea where it was and which article and what concept. Could you just collate all that and then give me the links to that? That would be really valuable, but that's not something ChatGPT has access to, right? 95% of the data online even is behind a password. We're focused on giving everybody an AI solution that learns on your data, that can answer questions about your business, right? ChatGPT doesn't have any information about Honeywell's daily operations, right? Or our warehouse's, inventory. Right. And so that's what we want, is to provide tools that let people be able to have the power of artificial intelligence in their hands. It's again, kind of like that shift from supercomputers to the personal computing. But again, in this case, we're talking about personalized computing, not just generalized intelligence, which is sort of general information, which ChatGPT can provide, but specific information, right? Your calendar, your emails, your data sources, like that's where, and then our agents are able to learn what are your preferences, what are your needs, and this could just be a conversation that you have. It doesn't have to be how does it get the data? It asks you.
When we use ChatGPT, one of the challenges that we run into is that it can't actually analyze that much data if you give it the data, which is sort of like when we're working on stuff where it makes sense to use it, we almost have to piecemeal it, and then it's like then we have like to spend forever editing it. And the fact checking is a big problem too. I have to say, it's almost like when we use ChatGPT, it's like I have like a junior writer who I don't trust, that I think's a dummy when it comes to actually comprehending information. Because for example, going back to Bernie Madoff, I asked ChatGPT yesterday, how much money did Bernie Madoff raise? And it kept saying $65 billion. And that's ultimately how big the accounts got to, including the fake interest payments that he was giving to all of his users. But he actually raised $17 to $20 billion. So I had to think of how to properly ask that question. It took me like 5 or 6 times until I thought, okay, principal, how much, what was the amount of principal that he raised? And that seems to me like that should be kind of a simple, obvious question, but it's still, it just couldn't quite comprehend that. And
you're assuming it's doing reasoning. It's not capable of reasoning. It's only capable of correlation. It's just doing statistical correlation, right? Like if you just said like Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of, it's gonna guess water because it's seen that more times than it's to fetch a pail of Jello, right? So that's all that it's doing. It's just that's really powerful because we've already encoded so much meaning into language that it works most of the time. But there are all kinds of weird cases where it doesn't, and as you pointed out, it's not trustworthy in those ways. And so now you have to basically spend the additional time to do it.
One last question for you. For investors watching on Verses, what does the rest of the year look like if they're trying to say, okay, how's the company executing? What are the things that they should be watching over the remainder of the year?
What we've already announced publicly, which is that we plan on releasing early versions of GIA, which is our version of sort of ChatGPT, which is a general intelligent agent. That's what GIA stands for. That runs on COSM, and we're looking at rolling both enterprise and consumer versions of that out in a beta capacity later this year. Expect to see some more announcements with some new partnerships on the enterprise and industrial side, and I think that there's a bit of an error in thinking about what Verses is in the public markets that I'd like to help investors understand better. First of all, Versus is the only horizontal pure play AI company in the public market. Everyone else is a vertical player or it's a big tech company, right? So you're not going to see these multiples on like, go ahead and invest in Microsoft and Google, they may continue to grow. Sure, you'll be fine. If you look at who our competition is similar to OpenAI. OpenAI just got a $10 billion check from Microsoft, right? At a $29 billion valuation. It wasn't, what are your quarterly earnings? How much money did you make last year? What is your roadmap? What's a clear roadmap even for the next like 6 months? Because they didn't know. What they knew is there was a technical breakthrough that was so valuable to Microsoft, they're willing to write that check. Now, who else are the competitors? There's a handful of smaller startups, all AI labs. So I'd argue pure play AI companies. Anthropic is one, Cohere is another one. They all have multi-billion-dollar valuations. Almost none of them have released a product. None of them have shown any revenue or even a clear understanding about what the business model is. And to be honest, like I said, this whole market's 6 months old. Why are the VCs like Andreessen Horowitz and Kleiner Perkins and Sequoia, why are Google and Microsoft and Meta the ones making all the investments in the handful of other AI players out there? The answer is, this is how you get 1,000x return. So when you look at Versus, if you've been in the public markets for a long time, you see another public company with a product and a team building something that they're trying to make some money on. And is the price going to go up? And if so, can I buy when it's low? And can I sell when it's high? And that's fine. And it's completely, legitimate way of thinking about it. However, I would argue it's incorrect. The way you want to think about us is that we are a Silicon Valley private startup. That is the profile of the company that happens to be in the public markets. And what we're playing now is a game of who's going to win the race to artificial general intelligence. And can you show that you can build and run a company along the way? But if you get hung up on, like, say, where we're going from a quarter to quarter basis, you're going to really miss the forest for the trees, which is a market positioning opportunity, right? The market positioning opportunity is multi-trillion dollars, let's say $15 trillion market opportunity, according to McKinsey, around artificial intelligence. Can Versus position ourselves with better technology, with AI that can learn and adapt in real time, that's explainable and meets the requirements of the EU and the US and Japan and Australia and everyone else is asking and now writing laws, and that is able to essentially be able to operate on your data, not just on public data, right? Is that a decent enough competitor? Because all of our competition as a startup all have multi-billion-dollar valuations with almost zero revenue, right? Who've taken in hundreds of millions of dollars, which they, by the way, have to go spend on those giant GPUs and servers, which we don't even have those costs, right? So at the end of the day, we look at our competition not as other public companies. We look at the optics of other private companies in Silicon Valley that are offering or intend to offer similar types of services. We just think we have a superior product. We think that we are well positioned in the market. We think that we actually meet the regulatory requirements that are coming. In fact, we just put out a paper announcing not only explainable AI, which was a research paper we put out yesterday, but last Monday, this Monday, what's today? Friday? Yeah, Monday. We announced a partnership with Dentons, the largest law firm in the world, an industry report, which will be coming out later this month, called the Road to Global AI Governance, which is co-drafted with, again, the largest law firm in the world, that basically lays out the path to AI, that highlights the fact that standards are the key thing that's required in order to be able to build these types of artificial intelligence solutions. And we are the ones that develop these standards. We partnered with the IEEE, who's the largest standards body in the world, standardized Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Ethernet, and intend to roll those out as the global standard for AI interoperability, explainability, and governance next year. My argument is we're better positioned as a company than all of the other competition because we're a standards-based approach to AI with AIs that can learn and adapt and can be compliant with the regulatory environment that has emerged here. The last point I'll make is that means that not only are we better than the other solutions for anything where you want it to operate on your data, or you want to build on something without being worried that you're going to get a knock on the door from some regulator that's going to fine you for $10 to $30 million per incident for having accidentally passed along some bad information from ChatGPT that wasn't built into your platform. But we can also act as guidance systems, our agents, on top of ChatGPT or Bard, because we can explicitly model data in the sort of COSM database. It's all traceable. It's all human interpretable, and it can verify that the information from Bernie Madoff was actually 20 billion and not 70 billion. Right. And so if this confabulates or lies or gives the wrong information, our agent can be that main interface. Say, hey, I need general information about Bernie. Well, here's a bunch of stuff. Cool. But here's a fact. And it can fact check for it and then basically provide the information. So suddenly we can help the competition to thrive in the marketplace, which is why ultimately what we're building is an ecosystem that enables all types of artificial intelligence solutions to be aggregated and our agents to act as that main interface to them. And so I think that what you want to do is look at us through a different lens, right? If you look at us through sort of marginal gains in the market, those are helpful KPIs. Those aren't the KPIs that venture capitalists are looking at their investment in AI, where they expect to see 1,000x return. And so most of the time, retail investors looking to see a few X return, that would be nice. But most have never seen 1,000x return because you've never gotten the beginning of a wave in technology where you're able to make an investment in a public company, because most tech companies don't go public for 7 to 8 years. And the VC's already made their 500, 1,000, or in the case of Salesforce and others, 5,000, 10,000x returns. So the question is, if you want to catch the AI wave, yeah, maybe you invest a little bit in C3, maybe you invest a little bit in Microsoft. But if you want to see significant returns, you need to invest in a startup with a horizontal play, and you can't get into the private one. So we're the only play. So the question is not how to determine whether or not to invest in us relative to what our sort of near-term goals are. Looking at the long-term sort of opportunity here, is Verses well positioned, and I would argue we're the best positioned to give significant gains over time. And then the only question to you as an investor is, what percentage of your portfolio makes sense to put into a high-risk, high-reward, early stage tech company like Verses, which you almost never get to invest in because that's typically all private equity and venture capital investment. So I think that's the key to looking at us, is to really kind of look at what's relevant to the traction that we're getting in terms of the technology, the team we're building. And then, yes, there'll be ongoing market signals, the vanilla ones that you might expect. But I think what you want to look for is like, how are we positioned relative to everyone else, relative to the size of the opportunity?
Okay, well, Gabriel, thank you so much for hopping on today. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I've learned a lot. I wish you guys continued success, and please keep coming on here as the story develops. And I'm really excited to try out Gia once it's available. And is it going to be rolled out sort of like on a beta where you got to get on a wait list? So that's sort of the idea.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. But I think awesome. we can get you towards the top of the list, Steve. Appreciate your support.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Gabriel. Really appreciate you doing this.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. If you could do me a big favor, please hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Also, let me know what you think in the comments section. I'll see you guys all next time.